Hello and welcome to day 39 of revising UPSC previous year questions for UPSC 2027. In this video, I will cover GS2 of the year 2020. All the papers of 2021, 22, 23, 24 and 25 are done and dusted except the case studies of GS4. So today I will start with GS2 2020. So let's get started with question number 1. There is a need for simplification of procedure for disqualification of persons found guilty of corrupt practices under the Representation of People's Act. Comment. Disqualification for corrupt electoral practices, example bribery, undue influence under section 123 of the Representation of People Act, RPA 1951 is vital for free and fair election, Article 324. However, procedural complexities hinder its swift implementation. Procedural hurdles and need for simplification. Current cumbersome bottleneck, High Court election petition, Supreme Court appeal, reference to President, ACI opinion notification. So this is the process. So protracted judicial delays. Section 8A mandates that qualification cases undergo prolonged High Court election trials, often outlasting the legislative term itself. Multi-layered executive routing. The President issues disqualification orders only after a multi-step reference to the Election Commission of India, creating administrative lag. High evidentiary thresholds. Proving corrupt practices requires quasi-criminal proof standards, leading to low conviction and disqualification rates. Recommended reforms. Direct ECI mandate empower the ECI under Article 1032 directly enforce time-bound summary inquiries. Specialized benches establish dedicated election benches in High Court to dispose of election petitions within the statutory 6-month limit. Law Commission 244th report. Streamlining disqualification procedure is critical to cleanse electoral politics, enforce the rule of law, and preserve democratic integrity. Question 2. Recent amendments to the Right to Information Act will have profound impact on the autonomy and independence of the Information Commission. Discuss. The Right to Information Amendment Act 2019 altered the statutory terms, conditions, and salary structures of the central and state information commissioners, sparking debates regarding institutional independence under Article 19(1)(a). Impact on autonomy and independence. So you go through this diagram, and it is executive control. Erosion of institutional parity. Executive discretion on terms. Replace the fixed 5-year tenure with periods prescribed by the central government, lowered to 3 years by executive rules, fostering job insecurity. Salary and allowances control. Removed salary equivalence with election commissioners, giving the union executive complete discretion to alter pay structures. Operational impacts. Chilling effect on oversight. Information commissions adjudicate disclosures, disputes involving senior executive ministries, executive control over salaries and tenure risk, creating conflict of interest. Subordination of state commissions. Centralizing rule-making authority over state information commissions, SIC, encroaches upon the state administrative autonomy. As held in Anjali Bharadwaj versus Union of India 2019, an autonomous information commission is crucial for transparency, restoring statutory protection of tenure and pay, safeguards citizens overnight. Question 3. How far do you think cooperation, competition, and confrontation have shaped the nature of federation in India? Cite some recent examples to validate your answer. Indian federalism embodies a dynamic interplay of cooperation, competition, and confrontation, balancing national integration with regional aspirations under the constitutional framework of Article 1. The tripartite forces shaping Indian federalism: cooperative federalism, competitive federalism, and confrontational friction. So it is written here: governor state deadlocks, CBI consent, and fiscal ceilings. Cooperative federalism. Okay, wait. I read. Oh no, I was right. Nothing. Cooperative federalism, collaborative action, institutional consensus. The GST Council operates via constitutional consensus. Article 279A, disaster coordination, joint center state response during natural disasters and pandemic management under the NDMA. Competitive federalism, peer driven growth, performance indices, Niti Aayog's State Health Index, SDG India Index, and DPIIT Ease of Doing Business, rankings driven interstate policy improvements. Confrontational federalism, institutional friction, gubernatorial deadlocks, gubernatorial dead, gubernatorial deadlocks, delays in bill assents by governors, Article 200, addressed in State of Punjab versus Principal Secretary 2023, investigative and fiscal disputes, states withdrawing general consent to CBI and disputes regarding net borrowing ceilings under Article 293. Sustaining India's federal equilibrium requires revitalizing the Interstate Council, Article 263, and implementing the Punchi Commission recommendation to harmonize competitive and cooperative impulses. If you look at the trend, so you will find that after 2021, the number of static question reduces in all the four subjects, GS 1, 2, 3, 4. Even in GS4, they are asking like more of a thought based question, like this is the statement by this thinker and you need to evaluate or explain this, like that. But before that they were asking values, aptitude, and all that, right? So that is the advantage of going through the previous year question papers. If you go uh, through the 10 or 13 years of previous year question paper, I decided to go till 2013. If you go through the previous year question papers only, I bet that your prelims will be sure, because it will cover everything. These question papers covers everything, and you are much ahead of your competitors, both in prelims and in mains. Question number 4. The judicial systems in India and UK seems to be converging as well as diverging in recent times. Highlight the key points of convergence and divergence between the two nations in terms of their judicial practices. This is the year 2020, and you will see from 2020 to 2025, they are asking three countries only: UK, France, and USA. And in these three, UK and USA are like more of their first choice in these years from 2020 to 2025. France is also important. So you need to have all these questions together, and let's see what they will ask in 2026. Inheriting its common law foundation from Britain, India's judicial architecture shares deep institutional roots with the United Kingdom. However, written constitutionalism in India and evolving statutory reforms in the UK have created points of both convergence and divergence. Points of convergence and divergence. So, first, the comparative judicial vectors, points of convergence, points of divergence, and these things are written here: basic structure review versus parliamentary sovereignty, collegium system versus jack. Key points of convergence: institutional independence. The UK established its independent Supreme Court via the Constitutional Reform Act 2005, operationalized in 2009. Moving away from the House of Lords model and converging with India's apex court model. Human rights protection. UK courts enforce the Human Rights Act 1998, echoing Indian judicial expansion of fundamental rights under Article 21. Key points of divergence. India UK can strike India can strike down primary legislation via basic structure doctrine. Kesavananda Bharati follows parliamentary sovereignty. Courts issue declaration of incompatibility without invalidating statutes. Judicial appointment, judge-led collegium system, second, third judge cases. Independent judicial appointment commissions comprising judges, lawyers, and laypersons. Public interest litigation. Broad locus standi via active PIL mechanism. Traditional stricter locus standi requirements. While both judiciaries uphold the rule of law, India's written constitution grants its judiciary expansive review powers, distinct from Britain's sovereign parliamentary traditions. Once a speaker, always a speaker. Do you think this practice should be adopted to impart objectivity to the office of the Speaker of Lok Sabha? What could be its implications for the robust functioning of parliamentary business in India? The British Convention of once a speaker, always a speaker requires an elected speaker to resign from their political party, contest subsequent elections unopposed, and maintain lifelong political neutrality. Adopting this convention in India could help address concerns regarding partisan bias under Article 93. Should the practice be adopted in India? So first go through this figures, the speaker's neutrality dilemma. So need for neutrality, Article 93, 10th schedule, and adaptation roadblocks. So eliminating partisan suspicions relieves the speaker from party discipline, ensuring impartiality when allocating debate time and admitting motions. Reforming 10th schedule adjudication eliminates conflict of interest in deciding disqualification petitions under the anti-defection law. A recurring challenge flagged in Quixote Holoha 1992 and Kisham Meghchandra 2020. Implications for parliamentary business. Enhanced House decorum. Opposition parties are more likely to respect rulings from an independent speaker, reducing floor disruptions and walkouts. Electoral roadblocks. Adopting the convention requires all political parties to agree not to field candidates against the sitting speaker, a difficult consensus in India's fragmented multi-party democracy. Loss of political career. Without guaranteed uncontested returns, Indian politicians may hesitate to accept the speakership if it requires permanently serving party ties. Adopting the British Convention or transferring 10th schedule disqualification powers to an independent tribunal as recommended by the Supreme Court and the second ARC would strengthen the institutional credibility of the speaker's office, not choice. Question 6. In order to enhance the prospects of social development, sound and adequate healthcare policies are needed, particularly in the fields of geriatric and maternal health care. Discuss. Under Article 47 of the Constitution, public health is a primary duty of the state. Sound healthcare policies targeting vulnerable demographics, specifically mothers and elderly, form the cornerstone of inclusive social development. SDG 3, policies in geriatric and maternal health. Life course healthcare model. So maternal healthcare interventions, geriatric healthcare architecture. So this is written here. Palliative care and Ayushman Bharat cover. Maternal health as a development driver. Intergenerational dividends, interventions under Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana and Janani Suraksha Yojana lower maternal mortality ratio, preventing child stunting and cognitive deficits. Economic agencies, safe maternity practices, reduces catastrophic health expenditure, enabling sustained female labor force participation, addressing the geriatric shift, demographic transition. with India's elderly population projected to exceed 15% by 2036. UNFPA India Aging Report non-communicable diseases management is vital. Institutional support, scaling the National Program for Healthcare of the Elderly (NPSCE) and Ayushman Bharat packages provides palliative care and age-friendly health centers, integrating maternal and geriatric healthcare across the life cycle, builds human capital, advances social equity, and realizes the vision of universal health coverage. Question 7. Institutional quality is a crucial driver of economic performance. In this context, suggest reforms in civil services for strengthening democracy. As highlighted by Nobel laureates Acemoglu and Robinson, sorry if I mispronounced the name, inclusive institutions driven sustained economic growth. Civil services represent the permanent executive machinery. Reforming administrative capacity is vital for democratic accountability and economic productivity. Civil service reforms to strengthen democracy. Civil service transformation matrix, specialized lateral entry, tenure and accountability, digital delivery. So this is written here, faceless processing and citizens charter. Domain specialization and lateral entry. Inducting external domain experts at joint secretary and director levels enhances regulatory efficiency in finance, infrastructure, and technology. Second ARC recommendations. Security of tenure. Establishing independent civil services boards as directed in Prakash Singh checks arbitrary political transfer, ensuring non-partisan administrative continuity. Competency-based capacity building. Scaling Mission Karma Yogi transitions, training from rule-based to role-based competency, improving public service delivery, performance-linked accountability, modernizing 360-degree appraisal mechanism, and strictly retiring non-performing or corrupt officers under Fundamental Rule 56J. Citizen-centric administration, mandating enforceable citizen charter, faceless e-governance, and regular social audits to deter rent-seeking and corruption. Reforming the civil service transformation bureaucracy into an agile enabler of economic development, strengthening democratic governance, and realizing SDG 16. Question 8. The emergence of fourth industrial revolution, digital revolution, has initiated e-governance as an integral part of the government. Discuss. The fourth industrial revolution, driven by artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain, cloud computing, and IoT, has transformed e-governance from basic digitization of public records into predictive, automated, and citizen-centric governance. Role of 4IR means fourth industrial revolution technologies in modern governance. So this is the diagram: AI and predictive analytics, blockchain transparency, IoT and sensor networking. And this is written here: real-time urban infrastructure. Let me do this. Okay, it is like anyway, leave it. So this is written here: real-time urban infrastructure and water grid management. Okay, it is fine now. Let's try once more. Okay, it is fine now. So predictive policy making. AI algorithms and big data analytics enable real-time tracking of welfare delivery. Example: PM Kisan GST tax evasion analytics, enhancing fiscal governance. Immutable public record. Blockchain platforms provide tamper-proof land records and verifiable digital credentials. DigiLocker, eliminating bureaucratic intermediaries. Real-time infrastructure management. IoT sensors monitor municipal water supply, urban traffic, and ambient pollution under the Smart Cities mission. Public service democratization. The India stake, Aadhaar, UPI, DigiLocker, ONDC enables rapid, scalable delivery of welfare benefits, financial inclusion, and healthcare access. ABHA, automated citizen interfaces, AI-powered conversational chatbots. Umang, IRCTC, Ask Disha resolves citizen grievances 24/7 in multiple Indian languages. Harnessing fourth industrial revolution technologies bridges administrative divide, making governance proactive, transparent, and responsive to aspiration of digital citizens. Question 9 critically examine the role of WHO in providing global health security during the COVID-19 pandemic. The WHO, established under the UN system to direct international public health, served as the primary global coordinator during the COVID-19 pandemic, though its operational responses drew both praise and criticism. Critical evaluation of WHO performance. WHO performance evaluation. So this is the diagram. You can see key operational contribution, and this part is here structural vulnerabilities. Commendable interventions, global norm settings, rapidly shared COVID-19 genomic sequencing data, standard diagnostic testing protocols, and therapeutic guidelines. COVAX facility co-led the COVAX initiative to distribute over 2 billion vaccine doses to low and middle income nations, promoting global vaccine equity. Solidarity clinical trials, coordinated international clinical trials evaluating potential therapeutic drugs and treatments across thousands of patients globally. Structural shortcomings and bottlenecks. Delayed emergency alerts faced criticism for delaying the declaration of the outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern and a global pandemic. Lack of mandatory verification powers. The International Health Regulation IHR 2005 restricts the WHO from independently investigating disease outbreak without host nation consent. Geopolitical vulnerability and financial strain. Heavy reliance on voluntary earmarked donor contributions weakened its operational neutrality during diplomatic standoffs. Empowering the WHO requires finalizing a legally binding global pandemic treaty, securing predictable statutory funding, and granting independent disease investigation mandates. Question 10 Indian diaspora has a decisive role to play in the politics and economy of America and European countries. Comment with example. Numbering over 32 million globally, the Indian diaspora represents one of the most affluent, educated, and influential immigrant communities, increasingly shaping political decision making and economic landscapes across the US and Europe. Decisive role in politics and economy. So, diaspora influence vector, political representation and policy, economic leadership, and innovation. So, here is the second part, and this is the diagram. You can go through it, but look, I always say go through the actual diagram from the atlas or the books, because I do not paste those diagrams because of copyright or anything else like that. But you can go through this, but you can see the labeling are incorrect. It shows UK here, it shows Germany here. Absolutely wrong. UK is here, Germany is somewhere here. Switzerland, okay. Okay, according to map, it is fine, but it is not exactly here as well. Only France is up to the mark, closest. And this is true, Silicon and USA. Canada, look, it shows here. So it is again, it is Canada, but no one is living in this part of the Canada, so, right? So it is a rough diagram. You can go through it, but do not label it from like on these points. It connected the East Coast and UK, but no labeling here. Are you getting my point? So adjust accordingly and go through the actual maps from the atlas or from websites. Okay. So the decisive political footprints. Legislative leaderships, prominent leaders of Indian origin hold high constitutional offices such as Kamala Harris, former US Vice President, Rishi Sunak, former UK Prime Minister, and members of the US Congressional Samosa Caucus. Policy lobbying organizations like the US India Strategic Partnership Forum, shape bilateral trade agreements, defense technology transfers, and immigration policies, economic footprint and innovation, corporate leadership. Indian origin executives lead major global tech enterprises. Example Sundar Pichai at Alphabet, Satya Nadella at Microsoft. Driving high value employment and R&D. Wait a minute. Okay. Entrepreneurship and taxes. In the US, Indian American constitute 1.5% of the population but pay an estimated 6% of federal income taxes, founding over 15% of Silicon Valley startups. Silicon Valley tech startups. European integration, active presence across healthcare, NHS in UK, financial services and academia across Western Europe. The Indian diaspora serves as a strategic living bridge, projecting soft power, fostering international partnerships, and advancing shared geopolitical and economic interest. Just a minute. Question 11. Indian Constitution exhibits centralizing tendencies to maintain unity and integrity of the nation. Elucidate in the perspective of Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, the Disaster Management Act 2005, and recently passed Farm Acts. Although these are not relevant now because the government take back from these acts. Sir Ivor Jennings described the Indian Constitution as a federation with a strong centralizing tendency, while Article 1 establishes India as a union of states. The constitutional design equips the union government with paramount legislative and executive powers under the 7th schedule to safeguard national unity and economic integrity during crisis. Centralizing vectors in the Indian federalism. So Disaster Management Act 2005, Epidemic Act 1897, and the Farms Act, which are not relevant now. Still, let's go through the answer. The centralization through key legislative frameworks. Disaster Management Act invoked nationwide during the COVID-19 pandemic using entry 23, list 3, concurrent list, social security. The Union Ministry of Home Affairs issued binding uniform national lockdown directives under Section 6.2.1 and Section 10, overriding state level public health powers, entry 6, list 2. Epidemic Diseases Act, originally a state center statute, the Epidemic Diseases Amendment Act 2020 expanded central regulatory authority over port inspections, detention of vessel, and uniform panel protection for healthcare workers nationwide. The 2020 Farm Act, FPTC and FAPAFC, whatever. Parliament legislated on agriculture and agricultural markets, traditionally state subject entry 14 and 28 list 2 by invoking entry 33 list 3. Trade and commerce in foodstuffs. This created a barrier-free interstate trading ecosystem, restricting state governments from levying APMC market fees outside physical mandi yards. These legislative actions demonstrate that the Indian federal framework prioritizes unified national action during emergencies and economic integration, balancing state autonomy with national integrity. Question 12. Judicial legislation is antithetical to the doctrine of separation of powers as envisaged in the Indian Constitution. In this context, justify the filing of large number of public interest petitions, praying for issuing guidelines to executive authorities. The doctrine of separation of powers embedded in the constitutional scheme through Article 50 demarcates distinct spheres of the legislative, executive, and judiciary. While critics argue that the judicial legislation, judge-made law, breaches this boundary, public interest litigation has emerged as an essential tool to enforce constitutional rights during executive inaction. The PIL justification paradigm, doctrine of separation of powers, Judicial vacuum filling. So you can go through this. Why judicial why judicial legislation appears antithetical. Breach of institutional breach of institutional competence. The judiciary lacks technical expertise, administrative resources, and democratic electoral accountability to formulate public policy. Judicial overreach, encroachment on executive discretion can disrupt budgetary planning and blur constitutional checks and balances. Justification. Justification of for PILs. Justification for PILs praying for executive guidelines. Filling legislative and policy vacuums in the absence of primary legislation, the Supreme Court invokes Article 142, complete justice, to issue interim guidelines protecting fundamental rights. Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan 1997 formulated guidelines on workplace sexual harassment pending the POSH Act. Prakash Singh versus Union of India issued police reform directives to curb political interference. D.K. Basu was the State of Bengal 1997 laid down mandatory arrest and custodial safeguards to protect Article 21. Remedying executive lethargy. When administrative machinery fails to act on environmental destruction or human rights abuses, PIL compel executive accountability. Example MC Mehta environmental rulings. Protecting marginalized groups, democratized locus standi ensures vulnerable citizens access judicial remedies against administrative apathy. PIL-driven guidelines do not usurp executive powers. Executive power, they serve as an interim constitutional bridge preserving fundamental rights until the legislative and executive fulfill their constitutional mandates. Question 13. The strength and sustenance of local institutions in India has shifted from their formative phase of functions, functionaries, and funds to the contemporary stage of functionality. Highlight the critical challenges faced by local institutions in terms of their functionality in recent times. The 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts established local self-government institutions, panchayats, and urban local bodies, ULBs, while early efforts focused on developing the three F's, functions, functionaries, and funds. Contemporary discourse centers on functionality, the institutional capacity, autonomy, and operational effectiveness of local bodies to deliver public services. So, evolution of local governance, formative stage, devolving three F's, contemporary stage, operational functionality. Challenges, Sarpanchpati, tied grants, and bureaucratic paternalism. Critical challenges in terms of functionalities, structural bureaucratic paternalism. District bureaucracy retains overriding administrative and financial sanctioning powers, reducing elected local representative to subordinate implementation agents. Financial dependency and tied funding. Over 80% of local body revenue relies on tied central and state grants. Centrally sponsored schemes severely restricting autonomous local prioritization. Internal own source revenue. OSR generation remains poor due to reluctance to levy property and professional taxes, RBI reports on municipal finances. Proxy representation, Sarpanchpati syndrome. Despite 33 to 50% political reservation for women, entrenched patriarchy in rural regions lead to male relatives exercising real operational authority. Weak parastatal coordination in the urban areas. Urban local bodies compete with unelected parastatal agencies, development authorities, jal boards, fragmenting city planning and eroding municipal autonomy. Inadequate digital and technical capacity, shortages of technical personnel, engineers, accountants, and digital literacy gaps hamper decentralized planning under the Gram Panchayat Development Plan. Transitioning from nominal devolution to genuine functionality requires untied financial transfers, 15th Finance Commission, administrative capacity building, and digital empowerment under E-Gram Swaraj. Question 14. Rajya Sabha has been transformed from a useless stepney tire to the most useful supporting organ in the past few decades highlight the factors as well as the areas in which this transformation could be visible. Initially critiqued by skeptics as an obstructive second chamber or a useless stepney tire, the Rajya Sabha Council of States under Article 80 has evolved into a vital federal check, a deliberative revisionary, shut up, revisionary chamber, and an indispensable pillar of parliamentary democracy. Rajya Sabha transformation pillars, and you can see federal balancing wheel, legislative scrutiny, and special constitutional powers. So factors driving transformation: rise of coalition politics, the end of single party hegemony across both houses transformed the upper house into a crucial negotiating forum between the center and states. Diverse political representation: increased presence of regional parties ensures that diverse subnational interests challenge unilateral central politics policies. Eminent expert induction: nominated members, Article 83, 80, Clause 3, bring specialized expertise in science, arts, and social service into parliamentary deliberations, areas where transformation is visible, federal safeguards, and special constitutional prerogatives. Authorizing parliament to legislate on state subjects in national interest, Article 249, creating All India Services, Article 312, sole parliamentary oversight during periods when the Lok Sabha is dissolved, Article 352 and 356, legislative quality control and revisionary checks, prevents the passage of hasty majoritarian legislation passed by the lower house. Example, scrutiny and amendments on crucial constitutional bills, bipartisan deliberations and standing committees. Rajya Sabha members lead and populate departmentally related standing committees conducting non-partisan investigations into administrative conduct and financial outlays. Rajya Sabha has proven itself to be a constitutional safety wall, balancing federal interests and ensuring legislative deliberation as envisioned by the framers of the Constitution. Question 15: which steps are required for constitutionalization of a commission? Do you think imparting constitutionality of the National Commission for Women would ensure greater gender justice and empowerment in India? Give reasons. Constitutional commissions enjoy superior institutional autonomy, security of tenure, and protection from political interference compared to statutory bodies, transforming the statutory National Commission for Women created under the NCW Act 1990 into a constitutional body requires a specific amendment process under Article 368. So, process of constitutionalization: introduction of amendment bill, Article 368, special majority in both house, presidential assent. Steps required for constitutionalization. I hope you know what is this special majority or different types of majorities. Drafting a constitutional amendment bill, formulating provisions defining the commission's composition, appointment, process, functions, and autonomous budget. Parliamentary approval under Article 368, passage by a special majority in both Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, more than 50% of the total membership and more than 2/3 of the members present and voting. Presidential assent, obtaining the presidential assent to formally insert the new article into the Constitution, similar to Article 338B of NCBC via the 102nd Amendment. Would constitutionality ensure greater gender justice? Argument in favor: institutional parity and autonomy provides constitutional standing on par with NCSC Article 368 and NCST Article 338A, shielding leadership from arbitrary removal. Mandatory government consultation binds union and state government to consult the commission on major socio-economic policies affecting women. Civil court powers empower the body to summon officials and enforce compliance during investigations into gender-based atrocities. Gender justice enablement matrix, so strength of constitutional status and unresolved operational realities. Limitations why constitutionality alone is insufficient. Findings remain primarily Findings remain primarily advisory unless backed by quasi-judicial enforcement and contempt powers. Without independent investigative machineries and adequate budgetary outlays, structural backlogs will persist. Imparting constitutional status to the NCW provides constitutional prestige but must be paired with binding inquiry recommendations and adequate funding to advance SDG 5 gender equality. Question 16. The incidence and intensity of poverty are more important in determining poverty based on income alone. In this context, analyze the latest United Nations Multidimensional Poverty Index report. Poverty is fundamentally multidimensional. Traditional income-based metrics, World Bank's $2.5 per day line, capture purchasing capacity but overlook overlapping deprivations. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, developed by UNDP and OPHI, measures both the indices proportion of poor and the intensity average share of deprivation experienced via this is the formula MPI equal to H into A. So multidimensional poverty framework: health 1/3 weightage, education 1/3 weightage, and living standard 1/3. Why incidence and intensity outweigh pure income metrics? Capturing deprivation depth, income metrics treat poverty as binary, while MPI captures how severely a household is deprived across 10 indicators spanning health, education, and living standards. Targeted policy intervention, identifying specific deprivation overlaps allow government to design targeted scheme, example clean fuel under PM Ujjwala sanitation via SBM rather than generic cash transfer. Analysis of UN MPI findings, special reference to India. Historic poverty reduction. India lifted over 415 million people out of multidimensional poverty within a 15-year period, demonstrating targeted social safety net effectiveness. Fastest deprivation declines. Significant drops are recorded in access to electricity, sanitation, clean cooking fuel, and drinking water. SDG 1, no poverty. Persistent vulnerabilities, nutrition and education schooling deprivations remain. Lagging areas disproportionately concentrated among rural populations, female-headed household, and marginalized social groups. Shifting focus to poverty incidence and intensity enables holistic convergence-based policy execution. Niti Aayog National MPI, accelerating progress towards SDG 1. Question 17. Microfinance as an anti-poverty vaccine is aimed at asset creation and income security of the rural poor in India. Evaluate the role of the self-help groups in achieving the twin objectives along the empowering women in rural India. Microfinance provides collateral-free financial access to marginalized populations. In rural India, the self-help groups banking linkage program supported by NABARD and Day NRLM acts as an institutional economic catalyst for rural transformation. SHG empowerment cycles, collateral-free credit, proactive asset creation, income security, and female agency. Role in asset creation and income security. Productive rural asset creation. Microcredit allows women to invest in capital generating assets such as dairy, livestock, poultry farming, micro irrigation tools, and tailoring equipments. Income diversification shifts vulnerable households away from volatile agricultural wage labor towards diversified non-farm micro enterprises. Lakpati Didi initiative. Choking unserious no choking usurious money lenders. Sorry if I mispronounced this word. Institutional microfinance reduces reliance on exploitative village informal credit, preserving household savings, empowering women in rural India. dimensions and transformation via SHG microfinance. Financial autonomy establishes independent saving account, formal credit histories, and direct control over household capital allocation. Social leadership builds collective bargaining power against rural social events, domestic violence, alcohol abuse, and improves girls' education. Political agencies encourages active female participation in Gram Sabhas and local PRIs, challenging patriarchal barriers, Sarpanch Pati syndrome. Critical challenges, issues of regional credit skewness, higher concentration in southern states, micro enterprise market linkage, bottleneck, and the emergence of predatory private MFIs charging excessive interest rates. SHG microfinance serve as an effective anti-poverty tool. Scaling its impact requires building robust e-commerce linkages and providing specialized skill training under PM Vishwakarma. Question 18, National Education Policy. National Education Policy 2020 is in conformity with the Sustainable Development Goal 4. It intends to restructure and reorient education system in India. Critically examine the statement. The National Education Policy NEP 2020 replaced the 1986 framework aiming to provide inclusive, equitable, and quality education aligned with Sustainable Development Goal 4. It reimagines Indian education through structural, pedagogical, and administrative reforms. NEP 2020 structural reorientation, pedagogical shift 5334, higher ed, multiple entry exit, and this equitable inclusion. Conformity with SDG 4 and systemic restructuring. Early childhood care and education restructures schooling into the 5334 curricular model, bringing children aged 3 to 6 into formal education. SDG 4.2, foundational literacy and numeracy, prioritizes basic universal reading and math through the NIPU and Bharat Mission. SDG 4.1, flexible higher education, introduce 4 years undergraduate programs with multiple entry exit points, credit transfers via the academic bank of credit, and interdisciplinary learning. Vocational and mother tongue integration promotes instruction in regional languages in primary schools and integrates vocational training from grade 6. NCRF alignment. Critical gaps and implementation challenges. Funding constraint. The mandate allocation of 6% of GDP toward education remains unfulfilled, constraining infrastructure scaling. Persistent digital divide. Over reliance on EdTech, PME Vidya risk, excluding marginalized students lacking digital hardware. Federal friction. Certain states have resisted standardized curriculum framework and 3-language formula, citing federal educational autonomy. Concurrent list. NEP 2020 provides a progressive roadmap for educational transformation, realizing its vision demands sustained center-state fiscal cooperation and teacher capacity building. NISTA. Question 19. Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. Quad is transforming itself into a trade bloc from a military alliance in present times. Discuss. The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, comprising India, USA, Japan, and Australia, emerged as a strategic consultative forum for a free and open Indo-Pacific. While initially viewed through a maritime security lens, the Quad has diversified its economic security and global public goods. Evolution of Quad's focus: maritime alignment, Malabar, critical tech and supply chains, public goods, and IPEF. As the Quad become a trade bloc, not a formal trade bloc, a classic trade bloc, EU, ASEAN, RCEP requires preferential tariff agreements, customs unions, or free trade agreements. The Quad has no unified tariff reduction schedules or collective free trade pacts, broadening toward geo-economic security. Rather than forming a tariff union, the Quad has expanded its functional agenda beyond traditional naval exercises Malabar to address economic vulnerabilities. quad functional dimension. So critical technologies, supply chain resilience, and global public goods. Supply chain resilience initiative, de-risking critical supply chains, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, rare earth, away from unilateral dependencies. Critical and emerging technologies, joint working groups setting global standards on 5G, 6G, Open RAN networks, artificial intelligence and quantum computing, infrastructure and public goods, delivering regional public goods such as the Quad Vaccine Partnership, Green Shipping Corridors, and the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. The Quad is not a formal trade bloc, it is an agile, multidimensional, minilateral coalition balancing maritime security with critical technology cooperation and supply chain resilience. Question 20. What is the significance of the Indo-US defense deal over the Indo-Russian deals discussed with reference to stability in the Indo-Pacific region? India's defense modernization strategy balances its historical legacy partnership with Russia against a deepening comprehensive global strategic partnership with the United States, which is critical for underwriting maritime deterrence and balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. Significance of the Indo-US defense deal over Indo-Russian deals. High-end technological co-production. The US-India ICET and Defense Acceleration Ecosystem Indus Acts facilitated critical technology transfer. Example, GEF 414 jet engine co-production and MQ-9B Sea Guard. Hold on. MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones contrasting with Russian hardware constraints. Deep interoperability foundational packs. Packs like Lemoa, Comcasa, and Beka enable real-time geospatial intelligence sharing and logistical interoperability across the Indo-Pacific. Sanctions and supply chain diversifications. Russian supply chain bottlenecks following the Ukraine war and CARSA risk highlight the imperative of diversifying defense procurement. So this is the diagram, this is the map, Indo-Pacific maritime choke points and Indo-US joint patrol and surveillance reach. As I said earlier, and I will saying it again, that go through the maps from the website, from the internet as well, from the atlas as well, okay? Because these are like AI generated maps, and this could be, as you can see, it is showing Strait of Malacca here, but actually it is here, right? So it's a Palk Strait, but it is showing it here. So that is the reason, right? You should go through the map, but this is for the idea that what kind of map you can draw, okay? Significance for stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Deterring aggressive unilateralism. Indo-US maritime intelligence sharing enhances India's domain awareness across the Indian Ocean region, countering expanding naval footprints in critical choke points. Example, Strait of Malacca or Malacca Strait. Preserving strategic autonomy while expanding US technological integration. India continues to utilize Russian system S-400 and BrahMos, preventing complete alignment with any single military bloc while maintaining regional deterrence. Indo-US defense integration strengthens technological capability and maritime surveillance, serving as a critical anchor for peace, deterrence, and a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific.